you're something special, huh? Tell your little sister to stay away from the team or we'll make sure everyone sees what we have." That was the text. Sent to my phone at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. I read it 3 times. Then I set my phone face down on the kitchen counter and stood there in the dark for a long time. My name is Colton Briggs. I'm 31 years old. I spent 6 years as a criminal intelligence analyst with the Department of Defense before I left to take care of my family after our parents died. I know how to read people. I know how to track information. And I know exactly what it means when someone sends a threat and signs it with confidence. It means they've done it before and gotten away with it. My sister Mara is 17. She's the kind of kid who wakes up at 5 a.m. to get to swim practice before school, who keeps a training log in the spiral notebook, who cried when she got cut from varsity sophomore year and then quietly made the team her junior year without saying a word to anyone until her name was on the board. She doesn't complain. She doesn't ask for much. She just works. 3 weeks before that text arrived, Mara came home from practice and went straight to her room. No, hey, no stopping in the kitchen. I heard her door close softly, not a slam, which would have been normal, just a quiet, deliberate click. I knocked 20 minutes later. She said she was fine. I believed her for about 2 days. Then I noticed she stopped wearing her team hoodie. She'd worn that thing every day since August. I asked her about it casually one evening. She shrugged and said she left it at school. I asked if practice was going okay. She said yeah. I asked if anyone had said anything to her. She looked at me for just a second too long before she said no. That's when I knew. I didn't push her that night. Pushing Mara never works. She closes down like a door with a deadbolt. Instead, I made dinner, we watched TV, and I waited. 2 days later, she told me. The girls at the top of the team. 3 of them, all seniors, all daughters of men who donated enough money to have their names on the new timing board at the natatorium, had been making Mara's life quietly miserable for weeks. Not loudly, not in ways a coach would catch, small things at first. Her lane marker moved. Her personal best times accidentally not recorded during time trials. Whispers loud enough to be heard. Then it escalated. Someone got into her locker and took her competition suit the day before a qualifying meet. She had to borrow an ill-fitting spare and finished 4 seconds off her best time. That result went on her record. She told the assistant coach. He said girls are competitive and to shake it off. She told the head coach, a man named Whitmore, who'd been at that school for 19 years and whose own daughter had swum at the program 10 years prior. He told her that team dynamics were complex and that if she wanted to stay on the roster, she needed to learn how to get along. Then, 6 days before I got that text, something happened at an away meet. I still don't know the full details. Mara told me in pieces over several days, but what I know is this. After the meet, in the locker room, 3 girls cornered her. They took her phone. They filmed something, and then one of them leaned close and said, "You don't belong here. This team was built by our families. You're just filling a lane." The video they filmed was sent to her number from a blocked contact 3 days later. I don't know exactly what's on it. Mara showed me just enough for me to understand the intent. It was designed to humiliate. It was designed to make her feel like nothing. Then they made the mistake of sending that text to me. I didn't call the school. Not yet. The first thing I did was forward the text to a former colleague of mine, a woman named Archer, who now works in digital forensics for a private firm in Virginia. I'd worked cases with her for 3 years. She knew what to do with a metadata trace and a blocked number without being asked. The second thing I did was call my former supervisor, a man I'll just call Royce, who after 20 years in intelligence now consults for a law firm that handles civil rights cases in education. I didn't ask for legal advice. I just asked him to walk me through what a Title IX complaint looks like when it involves coordinated harassment and deliberate sabotage of athletic performance records. He walked me through it for 45 minutes. The third thing I did was sit in Mara's room that night after she fell asleep and just look at how small she seemed. She pulled her knees up. She had her old stuffed rabbit from when she was 9 pressed against her chest. She was 17 years old, and someone had filmed her to use against her, and the people who were supposed to protect her had told her to get along. I pressed my hand flat against the doorframe, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to make noise. I wasn't going to show up at the school hot and give them a reason to dismiss me. I wasn't going to let them frame this as an emotional family member who couldn't handle competition. I was going to be methodical. I was going to be patient. And I was going to build something they couldn't dismantle. I took a week off work and I started from the beginning. Archer came back with a result on the blocked number within 36 hours. She couldn't give me the registered name. That would require a subpoena. But she confirmed the number was associated with a carrier account opened in the same zip code as the school, and the device had pinged a cell tower within 2 blocks of the natatorium at the exact timestamp of the text. That was enough to establish geographic proximity. That was enough for me. I pulled every public post I could find from the 3 girls I suspected. I'm not going to use their names here because 2 of them are minors, but I'll say that their social media was not private in the way they thought it was. Screenshots have a way of outlasting deleted posts, and their friends were less careful than they were. What I found across 6 different platforms: posts, reposts, story archives captured by third-party apps, comments on other accounts, was a pattern going back almost 2 years. Other girls, other seasons. One girl who'd been on the team 2 years prior, a backstroke specialist who had simply stopped showing up mid-season. No statement, no goodbye post. She'd been good enough to compete at state level. She just disappeared from the program. I found her through the team's archived results page on the school athletic website. Then I found her personal account. Then I sent her a direct message, careful and plain. I told her who I was. I told her I had a sister currently on the team. I asked if she had a few minutes to talk. She responded in 4 hours. We spoke for 2 hours on a Thursday evening. Her name is Waverly. She's 19 now in her 2nd year of college. What she told me added 3 additional incidents to the pattern I was building. Incidents that had never been reported, because she even told the same thing Mara was told. Get along. Team dynamics. You're being sensitive. Her father had tried to raise the issue with the athletic director 18 months ago. He'd been told there was no documentation and nothing could be done. 3 weeks later, Waverly stopped swimming entirely. I told her I was going to do something about this. I asked if she'd be willing to provide a written statement. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said yes. I spent the next 4 days building a document. Not for the school. Not yet. For the record. A complete chronological account with timestamps, screenshots, Mara's training log entries showing the anomalies and her recorded times, the locker incident, the meet, the video, the text. I cross-referenced it with Waverly's account and identified 3 instances where the behavior clearly matched in pattern and personnel. I added the assistant coach's dismissal and Whitmore's response. I included the school's own published anti-harassment policy, which was 3 years old and had never been updated to include digital communications. I prepared 4 copies of the full package. 1 for the school superintendent, 1 for the school superintendent, 1 for the State Athletic Association's Compliance Office, 1 for the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, which handles Title IX complaints for federally funded institutions, and 1 for a journalist I'd been referred to by Royce, a woman who covered education and youth sports for a regional outlet that had broken 2 previous stories about coaching misconduct in the state. I didn't send any of them. I waited. Not because I was uncertain, because I needed them to feel safe. Because when people feel safe, they keep moving, and when they keep moving, they make mistakes. And I needed 1 more mistake. It came on a Friday. Mara got a new message. This one wasn't from a blocked number. They'd gotten careless. It came from an account I recognized from my research. A secondary account one of the girls used for posts she didn't want on her main. The message said, "Heard you've been talking to people. That's cute. We've been doing this a long time. Nobody's ever made it stick." They were so sure of themselves. That's the thing about people who have operated inside a system that protects them. They start to believe the protection is permanent. I screenshotted the message. I added it to the package. I noted the account handle, the timestamp, and the phrase, "We've been doing this a long time," which, in the context of the full document, was practically a written confession. Then I sent the packages, all 4, same day. Certified mail for the Superintendent and Athletic Association. Secure encrypted upload for the OCR complaint. Email with read receipt for the journalist, with a note that I would be available for a background conversation. but that Mara's name was not to appear in any published material. I also submitted a formal request to speak at the next school board meeting. Parent comment period. 3 minutes. I told Mara that evening that I'd sent some letters. She asked what was going to happen. I told her I wasn't sure of the exact sequence, but that the information was out of our hands now and in the hands of people whose job was to act on it. She looked at me for a long moment and then said, "Do you think they'll actually do anything?" I said, "They won't have a choice." She didn't look entirely convinced. I didn't blame her. The school board meeting was on a Wednesday. I arrived 15 minutes early. I wore a jacket. I had printed copies of the key documents in a folder, organized with tabs, in case anyone at the table asked me to substantiate anything I said. I didn't need to raise my voice. I've learned that a quiet voice with a full folder is more unsettling than shouting. Shouting gives people something to react to. Quiet with documentation gives people nothing to hide behind. I had 3 minutes. I used them precisely. I walked through the timeline. I named the dates. I named the incidents by category. Not the students, but the conduct. I named Coach Whitmore by name because he was an employee of the district and his response, or lack of one, was a matter of institutional record. I referenced the Title IX filing by number. I noted that the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights had already confirmed receipt of the complaint, and then I placed a copy of the full package on the table in front of the superintendent and said that I had also provided this documentation to a journalist currently developing a story on the district's handling of harassment within its athletic programs, and that the district had an opportunity to get ahead of that story or to appear in it without comment. I thanked them for their time and sat down. The room was quiet in a way that felt different from normal quiet. Whitmore was seated to the right of the board table. I didn't look at him directly, but I saw him, in my peripheral vision, go very still. Somebody recorded the last 40 seconds of my statement on their phone and posted it that night. By the next morning, it had been shared into 3 different local parent groups on social media. By the following evening, 2 local news outlets had reached out to the school for comment. The school said it could not discuss matters involving students, which is technically true and also completely useless as a response when the documentation is already public record. The OCR complaint triggered a preliminary inquiry within 8 days. That's faster than average. I don't know exactly what moved it along. Maybe the volume of documentation, maybe the prior incident involving Waverly that I'd included, but the inquiry was opened and the district was formally notified. The week after that, Whitmore went on administrative leave. The school announced it as a voluntary absence pending a routine review. That's the language institutions use when they're trying to make something look orderly that isn't. 2 of the 3 girls were suspended pending investigation. The third remained in school, her father, one of the donors, making calls. I know because one of those calls was to a board member whose wife was in the same parent group where my statement clip had been shared, and she mentioned it in a comment, not understanding who was reading it. Royce connected me with an attorney who specializes in educational civil rights. We filed a formal civil complaint naming the school, the athletic department, and the district. We weren't asking for money. We were asking for 4 things: removal of the falsified time trial records from Mara's athletic file and restoration of her accurate performance record, mandatory third-party review of the program's conduct policies, written acknowledgement from the district that the harassment had occurred and had been mishandled, and a binding agreement to implement a reporting structure independent of coaching staff for athletic harassment complaints. They sent a mediation offer 2 weeks later. I had my attorney respond with the civil filing already drafted and a note that we would consider mediation only after the district acknowledged, in writing, that the complaint had merit. They acknowledged it. Waverly's father, when I called to tell him, was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We tried for almost 2 years." I told him I knew. He said, "I'm glad somebody finally made it land." I told him it landed because of his daughter's statement, that without her account establishing the pattern, the complaint was one family's word against an institution. He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then he said thank you. The journalist's story ran on a Sunday. It was thorough. She'd done her own reporting, filed public records requests, interviewed 2 former assistant coaches who had since left the program, found a 3rd family with a similar experience from 4 years prior that I hadn't known about. The story didn't use Mara's name. It used Waverly's, with her permission. The headline said the district had allowed a culture of targeted harassment to persist in its swim program for at least 5 years while coaching staff dismissed complaints. By Monday afternoon, the natatorium's primary sponsor, a regional commercial real estate firm whose name was on the scoreboard, had posted a statement saying it was reviewing its affiliation with the program. By Tuesday, the athletic director had announced that Whitmore would not be returning to the program. By the end of the week, the school board had voted to bring in an independent investigator from the State Athletic Association. The 2 suspended girls were barred from competition for the remainder of the season. The third, the donor's daughter, was formally removed from the team roster after the independent investigator's preliminary findings were shared with the board. Her father issued a statement through a PR person calling the process unfair and politically motivated. Nobody particularly cared. Mara's corrected time trial records were restored to her athletic file within 10 days of the civil filing. Her actual times, the ones she'd recorded in her own spiral notebook, the ones that matched what Waverly and 2 teammates had witnessed in practice, were now the official record. I don't think I fully understood what that meant to her until the evening it was confirmed. I showed her the letter from the district. She read it twice. She didn't react immediately. Then she went to her room and came back about 10 minutes later holding the spiral notebook, her training log, the one she'd been keeping since she was 15. She set it on the kitchen table and opened it to a specific page, a time trial entry from September with a result circled. She pointed at it and said, "That's the number that's in my file now." I said yes. She nodded. Then she said, "Okay." Just that. Okay. Like something that had been stuck had finally moved. 3 weeks after that, she went back to the pool. The program was under new interim coaching staff while the district conducted its full review. Several teammates who'd stayed quiet during the whole thing, not necessarily complicit, just scared, reached out to Mara individually to apologize. Some of those conversations went okay, some didn't. That's the part I can't fix for her. I can't fix records. I can fix records. I can fix institutional accountability. I cannot fix the social calculus of being 17 in a place where everyone knows what happened and not everyone knows what to think about it. But she went back to the pool. I drove her the first morning. She didn't ask me to. She has her own car. But she didn't say no when I offered. We didn't talk much on the drive. She had her earbuds in, looking out the window. When we pulled into the parking lot, she sat for a moment before getting out. Then she said, without looking at me, "You didn't have to do all of that." I said, "I know." She said, "Thank you." She got out of the car and walked into the building with her bag over one shoulder, her hair still wet from the shower, her old team hoodie on, a different one, new, that she'd bought herself, and I sat in the parking lot until the lights inside came on over the water. I thought about something Royce had said to me early on when I first called him and explained what was happening. He'd said, "The hardest part of cases like this isn't the evidence. It's not the filing or the process. It's accepting that you can expose the system, but you can't undo what it already cost somebody." He was right. The record is corrected. The people responsible are gone from the program. The structure that protected them is under formal review. But Mara lost a season she can't get back. She lost weeks of practice competing under deliberate disadvantage. She lost the thing that's supposed to be straightforward about sports, that if you work harder than anyone else, the record shows it. I can't give that back to her. What I can give her is the accurate number in the file. What I can give her is the knowledge that what happened to her is now part of an official record that will affect how this program operates for every girl who comes after her. She told me once, a few days after the board meeting, that the thing that got to her most wasn't the mean comments or even the locker incident. It was being told, twice, by the adults who were supposed to be in charge, to just get along. It was the message embedded in that instruction. That the peace of the group mattered more than the truth of what was happening to her. I've thought about that a lot. The system didn't fail Mara because of 3 entitled teenagers. Teenagers do ugly things sometimes. That's not new. The system failed her because the adults in it made a calculation, consciously or not, that protecting the existing order was worth more than protecting one girl who was, as far as they were concerned, just filling a lane. I was trained to analyze systems. The weakness in this one wasn't the girls. It was the assumption that a family without money or connections would exhaust themselves and give up. That's how it had worked before. That's how Waverly's family had been worn down. That's how 4 other families, as it turns out, had been worn down over 5 years. They miscalculated with Mara, not because I have some particular power, but because I knew how to document and I had the patience to do it right, and I refused to let exhaustion be the outcome. She's back in the water now. Her times are coming down. She's quiet about it, the way she's always been quiet about the work. Not dramatic, not making a point, just showing up and putting the numbers in the notebook. That's who she was before any of this. And that's who she still is. That's the only thing that ever actually mattered. I've thought a lot about what actually changed things. Not the filing, not the meeting, not even the journalist's story. What changed things was the decision, made quietly in a dark kitchen at midnight, to not react the way they expected me to. They sent that text to provoke a reaction. They wanted me loud. They wanted me to show up at the school door angry and unorganized so that Whitmore and the athletic director and whoever else was covering for them could point at me and say, "See, this is an emotional family. This is incredible. This is a man who can't control himself." That's the play people in protected positions always run. They don't fear the complaint. They fear the complaint that's calm, sourced, and patient. I'm not saying I wasn't angry. I was. The night Mara told me what had happened in that locker room, I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes before I trusted myself to go back inside with a normal expression on my face. Anger is honest. Anger at injustice is one of the cleaner emotions a person can have. But anger deployed without discipline is just noise, and noise is easy to dismiss. What I keep coming back to is Waverly. She and her father did everything right by conventional standards. They reported it. They raised it through proper channels. They were patient and they were reasonable. And they were worn down anyway because the institution was counting on exactly that. On reasonable people eventually running out of time and energy and money and just accepting the loss. That's not a failure of their character. That's a calculated bet the system made about human endurance. The system was wrong about my endurance. But more importantly, the system was wrong about Mara's. She went back to that pool. She got back in the water in a program that had been hostile to her, under new staff with teammates who had stayed quiet while it happened, and she showed up at 5 a.m. and put the work in. That takes more than I had to do. What I did was analytical. What she did required something different. The decision to not let what was done to her define what she does next. There's something I think about when I consider how this whole thing played out. The girls who targeted Mara weren't unusually cruel by some absolute measure. They were operating inside a structure that had taught them, across years, that their family's position made them immune. Nobody had ever held that line. Coaches looked away. Administrators calculated. Other families gave up. So they kept going, and they got more confident, and eventually they sent a text to the wrong person. That's not luck. That's cause and effect running its full course. Every system that protects the wrong people eventually produces a situation it can't contain. The only variable is whether someone is there to document it when it surfaces. Mara deserved better than having to rely on me to fix this. She deserved a program where adults did their jobs from the start. That's the part that doesn't go away, knowing that the corrected record and the institutional accountability are real, but knowing also that she carried weeks of deliberate disadvantage alone because the people in charge made a choice about whose comfort mattered more. I can't undo that. What I can do is make sure the structure that allowed it is different for the next girl who shows up at 5 a.m. with a spiral notebook and something to prove. That's what I told myself the morning I watched her walk into that building. And I meant it.